Is Ben 10 as great as we remember? Today, that's a question I'm hoping to answer by going through the final part of the OG show, which is, of course, the Ben 10 movie, Secret of the Omnitrix. If you haven't seen the previous parts of this video series, you can find all 4 of those linked in the description below. Outside of that, though, well, let's jump right into it. Much like most episodes of the TV series, the premise for this movie is incredibly simple. After a heated battle, something goes wrong with the Omnitrix and it enters self-destruct mode. Of course, now Ben needs to find a way to fix it before it's too late. The film begins with Ben and Dr. Animo fighting. First off, I like that we just jump right into the action, but what I like even more is how they specifically handled this fight. Because there isn't just one version of this battle, there are 3. Depending on which version you watch, you'll get a different one. Which is such a cool idea. I can imagine being a kid and talking with friends about this movie, being shocked, confused, and exhilarated to learn that your friend saw a different alien than you. It's a great way to squeeze more aliens into the movie without bloating the runtime. The general quality of action is also quite high here, with plenty of interesting set pieces, weighty movements, and fast-paced exchanges. Unfortunately, this quality of animation doesn't quite hold up through the whole movie. I mean, there are definitely some nice cuts sprinkled throughout, but there are plenty of somewhat awkward moments, like a CGI ship that doesn't quite fit in with its environment, or off-model characters, awkward shots and backgrounds, or a whole lot of enemies just standing still when they should probably be getting involved in the action. That's not to say it's bad. Instead, it's just inconsistent. Plot-wise though, the important part of this battle is that Ben uses his alien ability to stop Animo's plan, but he does it in a somewhat reckless way where he won't necessarily know the outcome of his actions. Of course, this results in Animo's machine releasing some sort of pulse, which sets the watch into self-destruct mode. Now, Ben doesn't know what's wrong with it, and Grandpa tells him he can't use it, but Animo's getting away, so of course he uses it anyway. Naturally, the movie is setting up some potential problems for Ben, his unwillingness to listen to others, and his over-reliance on the watch. Regardless, when Ben is impatiently waiting for Gwen to finish shopping, the watch gets worse, causes a ruckus, and they're booted out. Whether he likes it or not, the unknown change within the watch is going to impact his life. But then Tetrax returns, saying that he's received a self-destruct signal from the Omnitrix. Unfortunately, if they don't fix it soon, it will also kill Ben. This means the stakes are rising. Now it's not just the watch that's at risk, it's our protagonist as well. But there's good news. Though Tetrax doesn't know how to fix it, he thinks he can track down the watch's creator. So Ben and Tetrax take off on a journey through space to save the Omnitrix and Ben's life. But not before Ben's overconfidence rises to the surface.
I know, it's always serious, Grandpa, and I always win.
So far, this is all pretty good. We're getting a sense of the things Ben will need to work on through this movie, of his overconfidence and ego, but we're also getting a good dose of action. Now, yes, these are ideas we've gone through before, but with its movie-length runtime, I'm hoping that this plot will take things in a bit of a different direction than I'm expecting. It also helps that the idea of a road trip through space with Tetrax to find the watch's creator is super cool. It gets me excited to see what sorts of new enemies we'll face, what the wider world and space will look like, and what types of creative conflicts await them on their journey. But this is where the movie becomes more questionable for me. First, there's this scene where Tetrax learns where the watch's creator is supposed to be, and he uses this ID left in the watch to do that. Sure, makes enough sense, but this scene is unnecessarily long. That's not to say it's super lengthy or anything, but it does take a few minutes, and there's no need to drag out getting this tiny piece of information for multiple minutes. Let's get the info and get a move on. This could happen a lot faster. Overall though, that's just a bit of minor movie bloat that hints that this film might not always use its time in the best way. The bigger problem though, that's gotta be Vilgax. Vilgax is back? That's weird. Wasn't he in the Null Void? Well, I guess he's out now. Once again, this speaks to the show's loose treatment of continuity and its willingness to simply reset things, which, yep, not a fan of that. I might not care as much if I was excited to see Vilgax again, but Vilgax is still a pretty basic villain. I'm a big bad man who's gonna do big bad things. That's about all I get from him, even though he is a bit more intimidating than my baby voice. But I still want more from the main villain in a movie, and unfortunately, he's not getting that development here, regardless of the feature film runtime. Finally, Ben and Tetrax discover that Gwen snuck onto the ship. On an incredibly basic level, I like this. At first, I was worried that most of the main cast had simply been left behind for this conflict, so it's good that we might see something new and interesting involving Ben and Gwen, even if Grandpa is still back home. So from here, the group of 3 makes their way to this alien prison where the Omnitrix's creator seems to be held. As usual, Ben is pretty dumb. Even after Techadon warns him that these aliens will eat them, he freaks out when he thinks he sees Vilgax, abandons Gwen to her own devices, and transforms even though he's been explicitly told that that will make the watch self-destruct faster. Now, this does line up with the movie's main lesson that's being developed for Ben. Once again, he's acting before thinking, that sort of thing. But I still think that this pushes things a bit far. Now, I don't mind that Ben made a mistake and panicked, but I wish that he at least tried to help Gwen hide first or something like that. Regardless of his other issues thus far, I don't feel like he would so readily abandon Gwen in an unknown and dangerous place. But who knows? Maybe I'm giving the kid too much credit. There's at least one cool idea here though. This Vilgax lookalike named Myax was involved in the watch's creation. First off, I enjoy the idea of putting a member of this alien species in a totally different role. After all, it's hard to think of something much further from Vilgax than a relatively mild-mannered scientist who wants a bit of credit for her work. It makes the world feel more fleshed out, more real, which overall is probably the biggest strength of this jail section. We see so many different types of aliens, and to my eye, they all fit in with the Ben 10 art style and aesthetic well enough that I really buy that they're a part of this wide world. Basically, this jail is really good for world building. But once they escape, it's revealed that Myax isn't actually the creator. No, she was the creator's assistant, and she put her idea on the watch because she wanted recognition for her work, and she really disliked the original creator. So right here, this whole section of the plot is revealed to have been fundamentally useless as far as specifically progressing the plot forward is concerned. What I mean is that we could erase Myax from the narrative, have the real creator's idea on the watch, and go straight to him, entirely bypassing this sequence of events in the jail. But films are about more than getting from point A to B as fast as possible. They're about connecting with the characters, getting engaged with emotional conflicts, action and excitement and fun and world building, all that cool stuff. That being the case, what did the lengthy prison break show us? Well, we explored the lessons related to Ben, but I didn't really connect with how they did that. There was also that world building I mentioned, which I thought was a bit better. But, I guess if you like the idea of the prison break, this might be kind of fun. I definitely didn't learn anything new about Ben and Gwen, and outside of that contrast to Vilgax I mentioned, Myax isn't really all that interesting of a character to me. Unfortunately, all this is to say that I don't think this section of the film justifies its 10-minute length, which might not sound like that much at first, but that's about half the length of a regular episode of Ben 10 right there. Either way, from here, Techadon reveals that the watch won't only kill Ben if it self-destructs, it will also destroy the universe. Techadon's reasoning for not telling Ben?
I'm sorry, Ben. I thought you'd be more concerned about how this affected you.
Now, I get that we're trying to drive the point home that Ben is a bit selfish and that he's gonna need to learn some things, but what? This just doesn't make any sense. If it destroys the universe, Ben would also die. So what does selfishness have to do with any of this? It would have made complete sense if Techadon said that he thought Ben wouldn't be able to handle that pressure. Yeah, I could buy that, but this is just silly. The reason Techadon gave for withholding this information is nonsensical. To me, it feels like this was only withheld for the sake of artificially raising the stakes later in the film to fit more cleanly within a typical movie structure, even if it didn't really make any sense for the characters to act this way. Either way, the good guys are getting closer to the creator, but navigating through this asteroid field is tricky. So Ben has to help them by climbing onto the outside of the ship and directing them with the watch, which apparently acts as a sort of tracking beacon. But as they're going, Vilgax finds them, and now it's time for another 10-minute long chase. Woo! Again, I just want to ask, what's the appeal? Now, that isn't rhetorical. To you, the appeal of this scene might be, cool, a chase scene, I like that. That's totally fair. But at this point in the film, about 40 minutes in, that's not enough for me. Despite these world-ending stakes, I feel so distanced from it all. Like, why not take 5 minutes from this fight and use it on a scene to make Vilgax more interesting? Maybe he captures one of them and has a cool villain monologue where we get a deeper look at his motivations and he talks about what he's gonna do with the watch. That could be fun. But no, as usual, Ben 10's action is fairly devoid of personal stakes because I find these characters to be incredibly bland and basic. I guess there's one potential character moment here where this blobby alien saves Gwen and seemingly dies. But this doesn't land for me because I barely know anything about this character. Still, I don't want to totally write this moment off though. Gwen has bonded with them at least a little bit, so it could be interesting to see how this impacts her character. But here's the thing, it won't. We don't get to see that. Gwen barely has time to say anything about this before she's dragged away by some Wildvines and totally, definitely, actually, entirely, completely, for sure dies. However, I like where this leads for Ben. Because after losing her, he has a moment of clarity. He blames himself for what happened, wishes that he had been better. And though we don't lean too hard into it, Ben does lament her loss. Then Tetrax shares a story with him about his own mistakes, and would you look at that? We're getting some character moments. Over 50 minutes in, and it's happening. Better late than never, I guess. From here, Ben breaks down the creator's door and demands he fix the watch. But the creator is totally disenfranchised with the world and says it might be better to reset everything anyway. As he tells Ben, he created the watch to connect everyone, not to be used as some stupid weapon. One thing I will say, it's simple, but I like that the creator's a gray matter. It lines up well with what we know about these aliens. Also, the way Ben gets in here, you get a real sense of some desperation from him. But then Vilgax swoops in and the fighting continues. However, we don't make it far before, whoa, Gwen's back. And the blobby guy. That's disappointing. Now, obviously I didn't expect Gwen to be dead. Even I'm not that dumb. But I did hope to see her change because of this blob, so yeah, seeing that they're just back, that's a bit of a shame. However, my biggest problem here is that I didn't have enough time to dwell on the emotions of this scene, to see how Ben reacted to her death. I think her death instead should have happened a bit earlier in the film. That way we could see a bit more of him making mistakes because of that grief. Or maybe even see the result of the realizations that stem from this. Really, my point is that when characters experience something this extreme, I want to get a bit of time to sit with that, to see how it impacts them, that sort of thing. When Gwen just returns after we've barely had a chance to see Ben doing anything different, well, that's when this feels cheap to me. Regardless, the film obviously ends with Ben winning over the creator, fixing the watch, and defeating Vilgax. Gwen tells Ben that,
"You are a hero, even if you can't go hero."
Which might have hit harder if this movie had honed in more on the idea that Ben's self-worth is tied up in this watch, but that didn't really feel like a major focus for me. Plus, I remember Ben already learning that lesson in a previous episode, but oh yeah, I guess that was a what-if conflict. Still, even if the characters don't remember this, I sure do, and this sure feels a bit stale. Either way, now Ben and Gwen return home to Grandpa, and Ben says,
"We should go to the mall and go shopping for clothes and junk."
"Aw, isn't that sweet?" Ben's learned to appreciate this life he has with Grandpa and Gwen, and to appreciate them more too. But wait a minute, we already learned that before here and 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 here. Even the movie can't escape this retreading of tired ideas and recycled content, which to me just speaks to one of the biggest problems this show has had, a lack of commitment. By now, character conflicts have been reused over and over, and changes in characters have proved to be lies so many times, and just because a show was episodic doesn't mean that everything should be so flimsy. Honestly, at a point, it just isn't creative, and it feels like the show is leaning on a few basic moral lessons throughout the vast majority of its runtime simply because it would be difficult to come up with other moral messages or other conflicts or something. And before people say I shouldn't have expected growth in this show, what about season 1? Ben grew in that season, and the writers managed to do that without really getting in the way of the episodic plots. That was why I had this expectation in the first place. I didn't just tell myself the show could do this. The show told me it could do this. Overall, I thought this movie was pretty boring. From a wider perspective, I'd already seen conflicts that are pretty similar to this one, as well as action that was either equal to or better than what was displayed here. Beyond that, I didn't think it used its extra length all that well. In fact, I would have preferred if this was another two-parter that trimmed the fat a bit. As is often the case with Ben 10, I was left feeling that the show could have done way more with what was here, if only its time were used better. But now it's time for the final verdict about the whole OG series. Is Ben 10 as great as we remember? And the answer to that is probably pretty clear by now. There are great episodes of Ben 10, and there are also plenty that are quite good and that I'm happy I watched. But there are also a lot that are little more than these mediocre rehash schemes that are just so repetitive and dull despite all the promise of this premise. So no, I don't think this show is great. I didn't even think it was close to greatness. From the characters, to the conflicts, to the villains, to the lessons, to the action, none of this show managed to be consistently engaging to me. If you look back at this fondly or rewatch it and love it, all the power to you. It's just not for me. However, what I have seen a lot of people saying in the comments is that they think that Alien Force might be more my type of thing. Now, I've only seen the first episode of Alien Force. I haven't watched anything past that, and I don't even think I saw it as a kid. So I'm gonna watch that, and in a couple weeks, we'll be back on the Ben 10 grind as I go through the entirety of Alien Force in a continuation of this multi-part video series. If you wanna see those, remember to subscribe to the channel so that you'll get notified. Either way, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of OG Ben 10. Also, thank you to my patrons, and I'll see ya next time. Bye-bye for now.